9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Welcome back to the last session of our second day of conference, where we'll focus on the evolving space domain. As we heard yesterday from General Saltzman's remarks, if today speaking of space as a domain in itself seems quite self-evident, it is because there is an ongoing militarization of space by the three major powers: the United States, Russia, and China. The immediate operational challenge that the three great space superpowers face today is twofold: preparing for conflicts outside the Earth's atmosphere by trying to mitigate their growing respective threats with increasingly effective deterrent systems, and at the same time, equipping themselves with systems of technological and commercial superiority, namely production and logistics platforms. These, of course, could have destabilizing effects, since an actor could discourage an adversary from entering a conflict by threatening or attacking its space capabilities. This element could even encourage a space attack as preliminary in anti-access area denial strategies, as demonstrated by recent events. In fact, this is precisely the case that was first revealed last January by former Secretary of State Antony Blinken about a possible Russian launch of a nuclear weapon into the space considered by the Russian Federation throughout the war in Ukraine, and that would have been thwarted by the People's Republic of China. Despite what actually didn't happen, the fact that we have come so close to this turning point indicates that the global situation is potentially dangerous, and that the strategic advantages that space provided nations until a few years ago have become obsolete and are evolving into new forms. In this respect, acting alone in the space arena is very difficult and cannot be the best strategy for nations. Space is a costly domain to operate in and requires significant investments in research, development, and operational resources. Today, the so-called new space economy is a reality where military and commercial confrontation is played out on different physical levels: low Earth orbits, high orbits, cislunar orbits, and the surface of the Moon. To help us better understand the shifting global context which is affecting and is affected by space capabilities worldwide, as well as the relative position of Europe, we are honored to have with us one of the greatest experts in this field. Please join me in welcoming to the stage the Director General of the European Space Agency, Dr. Josef Aschbacher.
So thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you also for the very nice introduction. I do like a countdown before a speech. We're used to that from rocket launches, 3, 2, 1, 0. And this is really what we're having here today. So allow me to show to you a bit the space context from a European perspective, but of course what I'm saying is applicable also to many other countries or many other regions in the world. A lot is happening in space, and as you have highlighted very correctly, it is in a large change, and we have to see how space for defense, defense for space can work, especially in Europe. So I'm really honored to give a couple of introductory remarks on what we do and who we are. I would also like to give my compliments to the Aeronautica Militare for organizing this event. It's just remarkable, the quality and the breadth of discussions and presentations, really compliments for this conference. So who are we? European Space Agency. I think some of you know us pretty well. We are the European Space Agency. We have a number of member states who are defining the priorities. And as Director General, I have the honor to really implement these various programs of the member states. Italy is a very strong member of ESA. I'm also very honored to have the head of the Italian Space Agency as my representative in the ESA Council with us, Professor Teodoro Valente, but also many colleagues from the military and defense community who are working with us, I would say more and more. So what we do, we develop European programs. We organize programs with our member states. We have a very flexible mechanism of doing so. We call it optional programs, where a member state can sign up to as much as they want in terms of participation on space programs. And this is quite unique, actually. There's only a very small portion of our budget which goes according to the GDP, the size of the country's economy, but the majority, about 80% of our member state budgets, is what we call optional programs. That means a country can sign up a lot or less or not at all, and this allows really flexibility in implementation. So we are really implementing these space programs. We have a sizable workforce. Of course, if I compare myself with NASA, we are pretty small, or much smaller than our friends NASA. Very welcome to see you, Bill, here among us. A great pleasure. We are working extremely well, obviously, with our partners overseas and around the world. So just a couple of words of what's coming up this year in terms of highlights and activities of the European Space Agency. We have got a new member state, Slovenia, just a couple of months ago, since the beginning of this year. We have a budget, as you see, of about 7.7 billion euros, which is increasing. We have every 3 years a conference, ministerial conference, where we put proposals on the table. And the last time we have got a very strong increase, and we are now implementing these programs. There's one figure which I really would like to make you aware of, which is the very central figure of 1,500 contracts that we are expected to sign this year. We are, with the funding that we get from the member states, we are running competitions with industry, making sure that we have the best quality across Europe to build up European programs. And that means we define the frame. We spend 85% of the budget in the industry through competition, and we are signing this year about 1,500 contracts. If you divide this by 200 days, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, that means on average we sign one contract every hour. That means with all the elements that need to go with it, defining, releasing, asking for inputs from industry, evaluating, negotiating, and signing, we do this quite in a big scale across the agency. Of course, our main job is not to sign contracts. The main job is to launch satellites and rockets. We have had last year the launch of Ariane 6 and Vega C. These have been extremely important milestones. We are now the second launch of both rockets, and we have to ramp up now to make sure that we get to a cadence to really launch all our satellites. We plan about 10 new missions of larger size to be launched this year, from Copernicus, Galileo to Earth Explorers. We just launched Biomass a couple of days ago, which is a very outstanding Earth Explorer mission. But also, we are celebrating this year's 50 years of ESA. And by the way, I've just learned that the Aeronautica Militare has celebrated 100 years. Congratulations to you as well. 2 years ago, we are celebrating 50 years of ESA, which really is not only a celebration of the past, but really looking into the future. And for this, we have just published a strategy 2040, which will show what is our road for the next decades to come and where we want to, what we want to do. But there's also a big transformation ongoing internally to become faster, more agile, more dynamic, but also in terms of what we do and how we work. And the defense and security requirements are a key driver of the future, and there we are really having very strong discussions with our member states on how and what to do as ESA. Let me just show some of the elements that are really important for us this year. So we have a ministerial conference that is our next funding cycle, which is every 3 years, as I mentioned. The conference is in Bremen, in Germany, because every 3 years we have a change of leadership at the ministerial level. By the way, after Germany, Italy will take over and be the next leader at the ministerial level in terms of ministerial conferences to organize. So this is a big milestone. I mentioned the strategy. Also, the cooperation with the European Union is really going well. We have a new commissioner in charge of defense and security, or defense and space, Mr. Kubilius, and with him I'm really working very closely. And ESA is transforming, as I said, to be ready for the future, be more agile, more faster, more dynamic to meet the challenges of the future. And challenges, there are many. You all know the global situation, the geopolitical context, also the need for Europe to ramp up, to get more autonomy, to get stronger, to be also a strong partner internationally. And this is something that is at the core of the discussion which I have with my member states. In fact, I just had meetings with my member states, with the Council of these member states, and we have a language and a discussion that we could not have had about half a year ago or a year ago. That means our member states are asking me to also have a very strong focus on security resilience in order to make sure that we develop technologies and systems for the future in Europe. Of course, the growing commercialization and privatization of space is a key driver as well. Again, something where Europe is investing enormously. We have created an ESA investors network where we have made agreements with venture capital companies, 67 so far, which are signing up to our activities. We are providing space projects as an offer. They are providing the funding, and we have to make sure how this works well together. Last year alone, this network of ESA investors has provided 1.4 billion euros in private money in addition to our public funding in order to make sure that also the commercial aspects of space are moving forward. But let me also give you some news that are maybe not so positive and not so good, and shows what the challenges are, especially for Europe. So what you see here on the left-hand side is the global distribution of space budgets from the public side, so public space spending. So in the US, of course, it's NASA, the Department of Defense. In Europe, it's the European Space Agency, the European Commission, national space agencies, EUMETSAT, and of course in Japan, in India, in China, these are the equivalent organizations. Globally, we have a public space spending of about 100 billion euros or dollars, 61% in the United States, so really complements to the strong capacity of the United States. In China, 15%, in Europe, 10%. And this somehow is a situation that I would like to change, because Europe is capable of more. We have the expertise, we have the skills, we have the people, we have the industry, but the investments in the public side on Europe is not adequate and is not equivalent to what we can do and what we need to do. And I tell you in a minute where we need to really increase our spending significantly. You also see in the slide here that Europe is investing 0.06% of the GDP in space, while the US or Russia or China are investing much more. Of course, one element is to have strong partnerships. We have extremely strong bonds with a number of countries and space agencies worldwide. You see some of the logos here, of course, the United States, but also Japan, India, South Korea, Australia, and several other countries, Canada being an obvious cooperating state of ESA. And obviously, we go hand in hand with the European Union, the European Commission in Brussels. But space is inherently dual use, as you know better than me. There are many examples where space technologies is used both for civilian and for military applications or defense applications. And this is not new. This has always been like this. Some colleagues in the armed forces or space commands are really saying that 90% of all which is done also in the defense context is actually civilian or dual use, and this is something where we as ESA work a lot. PNT, secure connectivity, Earth observation, cybersecurity, quantum technologies, artificial intelligence, all these are domains that are obviously dual use. And let me just show some of the examples where space, and you know them extremely well from your daily life, are being utilized in both domains, both for civilian and defense or security applications, food security, security in case of crisis, but also maritime security, or even during COVID time to monitor essential activities on airports or of aircraft on tarmacs here. But what is the situation in Europe? And here you see a slide that is should be a wake-up call, should be a message to really for Europe to reflect what needs to be done and where we stand. You see here a number of figures. On the one on the left-hand side, the upper one, says that the space budgets globally, about 50% of the space budgets globally is going to defense in the world as an average. In Europe, This is 15%, not 50%. So meaning that the portion of defense spending in Europe as part of the global space budgets is much smaller, about 15% or a third of the global average. So in other words, Europe has to catch up. But also, if you look at the space budgets compared to the defense budgets, again, there's a ratio between Europe and the US of 1 to 3. 9% in the US, 3% in Europe. And the same is manifested on the right-hand side in the graph that shows the mass, that means satellites, that are being launched in space for defense programs. In the last 20 years, they have doubled in the US, they have multiplied by a factor of 6 in China, but they have halved in Europe. That means Europe is small and risks are falling behind. And this is the bad news of the message I have to convey, that Europe on one side has the excellence, but does not have the investments and is not putting the money into these programs as necessary. But there's a turning point happening at the moment also in Europe. As you know, Europe historically has been focusing on civilian applications and civilian programs. The defense industry at large, and all this is, you are the ones driving this across Europe, is really gearing up. And I would say thank God, and finally, because the current geopolitical situation gives us no choice than to invest much more on the defense side. And with defense, obviously, space goes hand in hand as a key element that needs to be building up as well. We had a very important conference just a few weeks ago in Warsaw within the framework of the European Union presidency, which is at the moment held by Poland. And I have to say the messages that came across there have been quite different compared to messages a few months ago or a year ago. In other words, the member states, the community at large is recognizing the need to invest more, to be fast, to be dynamic, and not lose time in order to really build up our capacity. And this is really something where we can help as European Space Agency. On one side, we are used to be a system architect of large European programs. We are developing, designing, launching all the elements for Copernicus, for Galileo, so in Earth observation, in navigation. We will work with the Commission on the next constellation, IRIDE, and we are working on many other satellites and systems. So we are a system architect. We have the technical expertise. We have 6,000 people in ESA, 80% of them engineers and scientists and technical people, very strong workforce, really recognized worldwide as one of excellent capability. We have the programmatic tools. We have a convention that allows us also to work in security and defense. We have clarified this with our member states. And we have a security framework which we have with the European Commission and our partners that allows us to handle also confidential information. The convention actually allows, and we have practiced this in Italy, for example, extremely well through a project called IRIDE, to allow us to work with selected countries, either one country or 3 countries or 5 countries, and not all 23 necessarily together. You would call it the coalition of the willing. We can do that, and we have the mechanisms in place from an ESA point of view to implement programs for a very few countries as required. And we're doing this every single day. Let me just show you an example of Italy where our data are routinely used, in this case for crisis management, flooding in Italy, but also for other elements. Let me spend one word on IRIDE. Of course, the Italian communities know this extremely well. This is a program which the Italian government has asked ESA to implement together with ASI and to develop a constellation of 60+ satellites, radar and optical, to really build up a constellation of dual-use nature and dual-use character. I would also like to underline that this is a project where we have shown as ESA, because sometimes people say a public entity like ESA having thousands of people and having a complex governance may be slow and heavy. No, we are not. And I was showing and proving to the Italian government, I was promising to the Italian government that we can be fast and dynamic, and we can be as fast as a new space company if you wish so. We have developed within 3 years and 1 month a constellation. We have got a contract of 1.1 billion for the IRIDE constellation. 1.1 billion euro is not small money. 60 satellites, optical radar with different industries is not a small project management task. And within 3 years, we are we have designed the satellites, we have built them up, we have launched the first one just a few months ago. You see the image here on the screen, and we are launching the other ones within the next year. And this is really something where we can show that we can be fast, can build up a constellation very fast and quickly according to the needs of a country or of a partner that comes to us. And this is something where I think which shows also this element of coalition of the willing. In this case, the coalition was one country, but we can do exactly the same for 3 countries, 5 countries, whatever is necessary and required. By the way, the UK being a member state of ESA, that makes it very easy also to work with the UK in security questions and contexts. But other domains where we're working are secure communication. You see here IRIDE, which is the future secure communications network. We will build up an interim system called GovSatCom, which is based on pooling and sharing of assets from member states to have interim solutions as of this year while we're building up the larger constellation of IRIDE. Obviously, there are also commercial assets available in addition to that. Also on navigation and positioning, as you all know very well, we have Galileo in place, but we're extending the accuracy of our system through LEO PNT to really come down to below 2 centimeters or orders of magnitude in the future, which of course you need for autonomous driving, but also security applications in the future. Today we have the most accurate PNT signals coming from Galileo compared to worldwide assets. So again, this is something where we work within ESA together with the European Union in order to implement really an autonomous navigation system for the European continent. CM25 is the moment where we have a funding opportunity. We are working in 3-year cycles in ESA, as mentioned before. The European Commission is working on 7-year cycles, and the interleaving of ESA funding with EU funding is actually quite perfect. Is an opportunity where we can invest in ESA in order to have pilot programs being set up and then being continued, extended, and even magnified within the EU context, within the European Union's multi-annual financial framework. And that's exactly what we're doing right now, that we are working hand in hand, obviously always driven on the request and under guidance of our ESA member states and the EU member states to really build up capacity together. So we have an opportunity at the end of this year. We cannot miss this opportunity because time is of the essence. We have to make sure that we are really acting fast and quick given the current geopolitical pressures and situation we have, and we will certainly do so, as I said, with our partners. And there's one example that we are asked by our member states to develop. The ESA member states have asked me to develop a European system. We call it European Resilience from Space program. We have been discussing this with our member states. Again, Teodoro from ASI, together with all the other 22 member states, we are building up this program proposal. It's an optional program. That means countries can or cannot participate in this, but I can tell you that I get quite a significant interest on this. And this we are building up together with the European Union, which is developing something called EOGS, Earth Observation Government Service. It is one and the same activity because we have created a joint task force where we're building up a constellation, a future constellation of high resolution, very high resolution Earth observation data in the optical, in the radar and infrared domain for various applications. And if I say very high resolution constellation, I really mean something where you don't get only 1 image or 2 images a day, as some of the current satellites deliver, but really every 30 minutes roughly where you get of any point in the world information updated, of course necessary and important to be utilized in the national context. It is also a system of systems that integrates, obviously, telecom, secure communication, in the future IRIDE, in the meantime, other means that we have at the disposal. It integrates navigation and really is an element that is geared towards the needs of security, resilience, players and actors, and this is something that is extremely important to respond to. Ladies and gentlemen, with this short introduction, I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much to Dr. Aschbacher for your insightful vision on this sensitive topic. Now let's introduce our last panel discussion with a short video.
Space is no longer the future. But the present. A strategic, dynamic, contested domain. A new boundless and limitless field where we shape new balances, set new goals, new ambitions. Change is on the horizon, and we are ready to rise to the challenge.
AeroSpace Power Conference 2025. Fighting and winning in the sky beyond the next decade.
In 2019, NATO recognized that space is no longer just an enabler for the military instrument of power, but is now also a real operational domain on its own, from lower Earth orbit to cislunar space and beyond. As we mentioned, strategic competition is already taking place there, especially with the exponential increase of private actors and the relative decrease of the cost of available space technology, which the industrial sector is already experiencing in the last few years. A process that has allowed, at least virtually, for a democratization of space. In this domain, the US and other major space powers are redefining their policies, while Europe faces a number of strategic choices in this regard, something we just heard from our previous keynote speaker. Whether and how international dialogue and cooperation on space are going to change to address the security challenges in, from, and to this domain still remains an open question. And that's particularly true because, unlike other domains in space, dual-use technologies, civil-military cooperation, and therefore the role of the major space agencies, created mainly for peaceful scientific research purposes, will have to change and adapt to an evolving environment where we also don't know which role will be played by the dominant and the emerging space private operators. How and in which terms the commercial sector will support NATO members and partners to face threats and challenges ahead. To discuss all these complex topics, let's give a warm welcome to our moderator, Astronaut Colonel Walter Villadei, head of the Aeronautica Militare Representative Office established in Houston for the commercial spaceflight and the access to space. And now our 5 distinguished experts, Professor Teodoro Valente, President of the Italian Space Agency, US Senator Bill Nelson, former NASA administrator, Engineer Gabriella Costa, IRIDE Project Manager at the European Space Agency. Engineer Massimo Comparini, Managing Director of the Space Business Unit at Leonardo. Engineer Stephanie Bednarek, Vice President of Commercial Sales at SpaceX. And Major General Philippe, French Space Commander. Colonel Villadei, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Christina. Good morning, everyone. Space as the final frontier, right? So, ladies and gentlemen, and distinguished guests and esteemed colleagues, it is an honor to be with you this morning, and let me thank you, the Aeronautica Militare leadership, for this great opportunity to be with all of you this morning. It is both a privilege but also a necessity that we gather today to discuss one of the most pressing and relevant challenges of our time, which is space evolution and its impact on the global security. Space has been for decades a quiet and peaceful sanctuary for international collaboration, though it's partly disease, as you saw some of the image related to our Axiom 3 mission. We brought payload experiments, international cooperation, but still now space is becoming more and more congested, contested, and competitive. A strategic domain, a crossroad among scientific, industrial, geopolitical, and military interest. Transatlantic cooperation, as we heard over these 2 days, has been a central pillar of our security strategy, as yesterday highlighted by General Saltzman. But now, as the threats intensify, spanning from cyber attacks to anti-satellites or hypersonic weapons, we need to understand how this partnership must adapt. So the questions that we are going to address this morning with these distinguished panelists will be focused on how we have to evolve to meet this challenge, how we can sustain unity in the global competition as more and more emerging spacefaring nations and new entities are seeking to assert influence in space and the aerospace domain. And then how we can leverage on public and private partnerships and technological enhancement to make our collective defense and security stronger, more resilient, more sustainable, thanks to new synergies. And then we've been heard that we are moving beyond Earth. So as we are going back to the moon, we need to think in terms of an integrated Earth-Moon ecosystem, with the lunar infrastructures and resources becoming strategic assets that required not only technological innovation, but also new legal landscape to prevent a kind of space Far West. So we want to understand which kind of rules we can in place to guide this new phase of the exploration. So security in space is no longer just a theoretical discussion as we have been dealing with over these 2 days of discussion. Space is an active operational theater and a critical center of gravity for military forces. And we must acknowledge the risk of miscalculation and potential escalation in space may even lead to a conflict on Earth. So therefore, this today's discussion is not just timely, but is essential. The future of space domain depends on the decision we make now, the partnerships we'll be able to forge with all these distinguished guests together gathering today, and the ideas that we'll bring to the table. And let me express my gratitude to the panelists which will support this discussion this morning with their experience and invaluable background. And so then, after these very short introductions, let me start moving on into the discussion. And I wish to recall some words that you heard this morning from the Chief of the Royal Air Force when he was mentioning Giulio Douhet, using the same words that he used in his masterpiece, The Dominion of the Air. Victory smiles upon those who anticipate the changes in the character of a war, and not upon those who wait for it to happen. And yet, space is definitely on the verge of significant changes. Availability of new technologies such as AI, quantum technologies, biotechnologies, cyber tech. And this will reshape our economies, our way in which we will handle and run our operations in the next years. The beginning of a new era of space exploration, following the ISS, the International Space Station decommission in a few years, will come back to the moon. And we are already looking to a farther and more distant target, which is Mars. And so we are now building up new strategic infrastructures in low Earth orbit. And the return to the moon, and then the exponential growth of the worldwide space economy that the ESA General Director was just mentioning in the opening speech. So with this said, I want to start with my first panelist, the Italian Space Agency President, Professor Teodoro Valente. And the rules of engagement are actually the following. So I will try to introduce a little bit framing the question. You have all 10 minutes, so we can have additional time for addressing the questions from the audience. I will try, since evolving space is a very broad topic, I will try to catch a couple of angles so you can expand your point of views. So Professor Asi has always supported and guided the technological development of the Italian space ecosystem with a multidisciplinary approach, so trying to stimulate the different angles and excellencies that we have in Italy. Since 2018, we have a new space governance taking space as a clear strategic and geopolitical value, and ASI has been playing an important role implementing this national space strategy. The question to you is, what are the technological trajectories that ASI is working on, aiming to increase the resilience of our national space capabilities, including the needs of the defense sector? And the other point is, Italy has always played an important role in exploration, both through our contribution in ESA, but also through a bilateral cooperation with NASA. So how do you envisage the role of domestic industry should evolve, considering the new phase characterized by the ISS decommissioning and then the targets that we are looking at? Thank you.
Thank you to you, and let's say good morning for a couple of minutes still. Anyway, thank you for the question. I think that it's already clear that space is a dual-use environment. That's a matter of fact. It has been a dual-use environment. It is now. It will be more in the future. And space assets are critical infrastructure, so we need to move taking into account this basic concept. For this purpose, I'm talking on my side about the Italian Space Agency, we do have a permanent table of discussion with representative of the Minister of Defense, which has been really activated 1.5 years ago, and is a table on which we discuss the national initiatives as well as the bilateral or multilateral programs of initiatives. And this is a long, let me say, standing tradition of the Italian ecosystem. Let me just recall the Cosmos Skymet initiative, which is more or less 20 years old, still running, which was a dual program managed and supported by the Italian Space Agency and by the Ministry of Defense. And so with them, together with the new governance asset, which has defined in Italy the Interministerial Committee for Space and Aerospace, we discuss all the initiatives, the running one and the future one or the foreseen one, respecting, and I will conclude later on this, the guidelines that the Italian government has given to us, recently published. In addition to that, I mean, our effort in order to identify priorities and to define the programs and trajectories, like you said, is to work again on a double level. They are parallel level. In the multilateral context with the friends of the European Space Agency as well as with the European Union, but also on the bilateral side with, for example, and come back soon on this point, with the US and the US programs, the NASA program, but also with the other countries which are outside Europe. And this is not in contrast, with the willingness and the needs that we recognize to increase or to support European autonomy and European resilience in space. because they are converging and they can give to us added values in order to well define in a rational way, in an efficient way, the programs that must be put on the table also for the near future. If we look to the US community with NASA, for example, I mean, the strategic partnership with them is historically dated. I can remember the memorandum of understanding which was signed between the Italian Space Agency and NASA in 1997 with the 3 MPLM modules which were built at that time. One of them has been transformed in PLM model, still on the International Space Station. And this led a lot of benefits, not only from an industrial point of view, but also from our scientific community, because we funded on ASI side, but there was also other contribution, a lot of experiments, more than 80 experiments since that time, and we had many opportunities for flying for Italian astronauts belonging to the European astronaut corps. So this strategic relationship has been a strategic relationship, is a strategic relationship, will be in the future a strategic relationship. And to this, let me just recall the last few days ago, joint declaration between the Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni and the President Trump for what it concerns common activity in space, looking to lunar activities and looking also to Mars activities. Well, we have read that in this context, the President of the USA proposal to the Congress for the budget, for the future budget for NASA, I mean for the fiscal years 2026, there are some things or some aspects which, let me say, can put on the table some concern, but I think we are not in a hurry in this moment, because we need to wait. We need to well understand if and how the strategic priorities of the NASA will be redefined or rescheduled. But anyway, our willingness to continue the cooperation on these topics is really 100%, as well as, because we discussed about that, the willingness to continue cooperation on the European Space Agency side. We are not in a hurry. We need to wait a little bit, even though we will have a very important, let's say, moment by the end of this year, as the friend Josef recalled before, because we will have the ministerials, 25, end of November, from the European Space Agency. But we still have time. We still have time to well define together in a synergic way with the aim not to be competitive, but to be synergic, to be collaborative, to be cooperative with USA, which will be the programs at European level. For what it concerns you mentioned the post-ISS or the issues, well, I mean, I am fully convinced that that one is a program, is a measure which is worthwhile to be supported also in the future, apart from the estimated lifetime of the existing International Space Station. What is going to change, as we know, is that most of the focus on the ISS has been put on scientific revenue, let me say in this way, not from an economic point of view, but scientific results. And if we move, as we are moving with this shift of paradigms, which is not changed, will not be changed in the future, also into a commercial approach for these issues, I think the role of the industrial companies becomes very, very important, as well as leading entities, the roles of the agencies, including the Italian Space Agency. But moving through a commercial approach, I think what is most important is the necessity to have a clear business plan for this kind of initiatives. Otherwise, only the institutional support is a little bit in contrast with the new guidelines of the new space economy. This means that the companies, with the support of the agency, must be able to discuss with many actors, must look for critical mass among them, must look for competition, but it must be a fair competition which must take into account also the cooperative or collaboration approach. They cannot be divided if we want to have success. And they have also another important role, I mean, talking about companies or industries independently by the size, which are labeled as space industries, they need to involve also non-space industries in this context in order to develop products or services which can be of mutual benefit and which can justify the estimation that we do have on the table for the new values of the space or new space economy. Without this enlargement, I think that all the estimation we know, they will be hard to be reached. And what we will do, you asked to me, Walter, as Italian Space Agency, with the full support of the Italian government, you have seen how many measures have been funded at national level, one of them in cooperation with ESA, the IRIDE program, under the Recovery and Resiliency Plan here in Italy for space. IRIDE is one, but we have the first demo program for in-orbit servicing. We have the SSA with Fly Ash. We have the Space Factory, which is another very important Italian program for digitalization of production of satellites as well as solar cells. We will identify, because now it's time, and we are working on that, identify and make some priority on space initiatives which have at least a double scope, a double aims. From one side, continues to support the growth of the Italian ecosystem. And the Italian ecosystem is a quite peculiar ecosystem because it's composed by large system integrator, small and medium enterprises, startup, and small and medium enterprises, but also by public, very highly valuable, internationally recognized public research center, as well as university. And the second line, which is very important for us, is that to support an increase on national capability and resilience in the European Union context, which is another important thing we also before, to contribute, as I told at the beginning, to European autonomy and resilience in space. And if we look to the main points which are inside the recently licensed documents on the governmental address for space in Italy, which is the guideline for ASI and for the elaboration now going on the preparation of the national space plan. I mean, there are some points which are quite clear. They are not articulated, obviously, in programs, but they represent the basic line out of which we will define our programs. First of all, support to research and innovation, and support also to STEM, disciplines, which is very important if we want to catch the opportunities, the new opportunities of the space economy. Secondly, supporting to growth and competitiveness of our space ecosystem with a particular focus on startup and small and medium enterprises in order to allow them to grow and allow them to be present in the international environment and international competition. And to this purpose, let me just remember that is now under discussion, it's more or less at the final stage, the Italian space law, which has some details or contents about authorization for space providers, let me say in this way, but it takes inside also measurements which have a focus on the activities of small companies, including all. And third, last but not least, and you mentioned in your question, also the other item which is underlined is the support and the effort for the international cooperation, both at multilateral level and bilateral level. So this will be the guidelines which are on the table now for the elaboration of the strategic documents, which will be declined in programs. So you will have a mix. You will have programs which will be performed and shared at multilateral level, but we will have also some national initiatives which can be shared at European levels in order to give our contribution to the increase of autonomy and resiliency of Europe itself.
Thank you, Professor, and please. Very broad and extensive answer. Just a few takeaways. I understood, the very importance for ASI within the national space strategy, support the growth of the Italian ecosystem, the importance of the STEAM topics, and we need to foster the youngsters to be more and more involved in this kind of studies, support the national capabilities, and what I understood the most is the importance still of the space diplomacy. The more it's complicated the scenario we are facing with, and the more we need to interact bilaterally and multi-levels with our partners to increase our skills. Last but not least, important for the next stage after the ISS decommissioning, if we move towards the commercial space flight, we need to have clear business model to support from both sides. That's very, very keen and important point. Let's move on the second panelist, which is the former NASA administrator, Senator Bill Nelson. Senator, as a former NASA, you know the U.S. Space Agency very well, and you flew also as astronaut. So to me, two goals seems very, very clear. The first one I was mentioning just before, a seamless transition to a post-ISS in LEO orbit, very likely with an handover with the private and commercial infrastructures. And of course, we are going to wait the new NASA administrator and the new administration confirm or change this strategic guideline. And second, a progressive new exploration phase back to the moon on a permanent basis this time, looking at Mars as a future destination. The question to you is, what are the most important technological challenges that NASA is facing now and you think will face in the coming years to achieve such goals? And the second question is, we had General Saltzman as chief of the U.S. Space Force. It was established in 2019. Can you expand about what is the relationship between NASA and the Space Force? Is it more based on a collaborational approach, or it's just based on a division of the areas of responsibilities? Please, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Walter. Thank you to all of you who are serving the public, trying to keep the peace. Thank you to Josef Aschbacher for the great relationship that NASA has with the European Space Agency and all its member states. With regard to your first question, it's two parts. What about low Earth orbit And then what is the future of going to the moon and eventually to Mars and beyond? So the space station is getting old. It has served an incredible purpose of scientific research, astronaut training, technological advancement, especially global competition, where nations of the world come together. There are some 18 nations that have participated directly, many more that have participated with regard to scientific experiments. But we need a new station. We need to deorbit the aging station. And we're scheduled to do that on the 2030. We've already contracted with SpaceX for a deorbit vehicle. Let me say on the international cooperation, isn't it an interesting phenomenon that between the contact between the United States government and the Russian government, there's only one area of cooperation, and that is the cooperation between Moscow Mission Control, Houston Mission Control, our astronauts and our cosmonauts. And it is a cooperation that does not miss a beat. So there is a significance, and this goes back, General Saltzman mentioned this goes back in the midst of the Cold War. There was a little bit of thaw when an Apollo capsule rendezvoused and docked with Soyuz. And the commanders of those two missions, General Tom Stafford and General Alexei Leonov, they became the best of friends, so much so that when Alexei died about 5 years ago, the big Moscow state funeral, there were only 2 eulogists speaking at the funeral, and one was General Tom Stafford. That tells you a lot about what space does to bring people together. The future of low Earth orbit, commercial, which you'll talk about, is unlimited. Look what's happening. But the commercial future of the space station is to replace the government station shared by international partners with commercial stations, bring the business of space off of the face of the Earth and to bring it to low Earth orbit, where we can do manufacturing, where we can do scientific research. For example, one very promising is cancer research. When I flew on the early part of the space shuttle, my primary experiment was protein crystal growth. That has now advanced to where they have had major breakthroughs. And today, the very successful drug Keytruda can now be administered with a shot instead of a lengthy infusion taking up to 4 hours in a doctor's office, all because of protein crystal growth of the proteins involved in the Keytruda drug. So we need commercial stations for the future. The question is, however, is it going to make the business sense? The cost of going into space without government subsidy, is that going to work? To be determined. Okay, now your second part of your first question was, how about going to the moon and then to Mars? Well, under our administration, we are going to the moon with the Artemis program, Artemis 2, which will circle the moon, check out the spacecraft, all the life support systems. That will occur next year in 26. And the plan is in 27, then if the SpaceX lander is ready, Artemis 2 will, the capsule Orion will go into a lunar polar elliptical orbit, will rendezvous with a SpaceX lander, and a crew of 2 of the 4 astronauts will go down to the surface. From my standpoint, that was going to be the first woman and the next man that would walk on the surface. As best as we can tell with the new budget just offered by the Trump administration, that they are going to continue with Artemis 2 and Artemis 3. But then the budget says, and there will be pushback in the US Congress, because it will cause the layoffs of a lot of jobs in the states of senators and in the districts of the congressmen. So there'll be pushback. So what's the final answer? We don't know. But what the budget offered by President Trump is, it says that after Artemis 3, no NASA program, it will be commercial. Assume that will be SpaceX and or Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin. So all of that is, we're going to find out. Your second question was, what's the relationship between NASA and the Space Force? And it's basically, NASA is civilian, Space Force is obviously military, but obviously there's overlap. The things that we do, which by the way is threatened in this Trump budget, climate science, it's very important that the military knows what all the 24 assets that we have up there looking back, measuring precisely what is happening to the Earth. It's very important that the military have access to that information. General Saltzman mentioned, we can tell you when there's going to be a wildfire because we can see disease in the forest. We can see it from up there. We can look at a desert floor and we can tell you if there is water under the sand. There are so many things that we share between the military and NASA, but we are strictly a civilian agency. Thank you, Walter.
Thank you, Senator. So, I really do appreciate the mentioning the strong partnership and cooperation between the US and Russia in terms of running the International Space Station. The collaboration between the crew members up there is perfect. So still is an example of what is and what has been the importance of the International Space Station as a diplomatic experience over these almost 30 years. And this is an important point because we'll see if the next commercial initiatives could even replace or play this role in fostering this diplomatic and international cooperation, which is a good point. I see some common understanding with the Professor Valente when both of you mentioned this commercial space flight needs really to be proved that can be sustainable. So how much can be sustained by the market and how much needs still to have the governmental side to be aside the commercial initiatives. So this is an important good point. And from the military relationship, straightforward, clear, military, civilian. Still, there are some connections. Professor Valente mentioned Cosmos Skymet as one experience and example when we shared skills and competencies. And this is something that we can leverage in the future as long as this unstable and evolving space will need to have a military and civilian counterparts work together. So thank you, and let me move now still on the institutional side, talking to Gabriella. So Ms. Gabriella Costa, she's the project manager in ESA for the IRIDE program. I will pick some of the elements raised and highlighted by the General Director of ESA. So at the end of this month, in May, we'll celebrate the 50 years of ESA. And still in the Article 2 of the ESA Convention is mentioned this exclusively use and support of the peaceful activities, but I learned that there are some interpretation which might allow to work in the dual perspective. This is very good for the safety and security as long as space is an enabler for the space security. That today the European architecture of space is becoming even more complex. So we have other institutions like USPA, DEFIS. There's this dialogue with ESA and EU, which is very important for build up the European capabilities. The question to you is, how could programs such as Copernicus, IRIDE, IRISquare could contribute to increase the European security in space without changing the basic nature, as Senator Nelson was mentioning about the space agency, which is mainly civilian-driven? And then the second question that I would like to address you is, the General Director was mentioning the need of, or the risk to reduce the competitiveness of our industry. And this is where it comes to understand, even from the procurement standpoint, which are the tools that we can put in place. NASA, for instance, chooses for the commercial space flight a kind of a firm, fixed price solution. We have the geographical return as a European level. What do you think can be done in the future to even change this procurement, and of course, just touching base on this topic, which is very complicated, for supporting the goal to make the European industry more efficient?
Thank you for the very articulated question. Good afternoon, everybody. For sure, peaceful purposes and security can coherently coexist. And ESA, USPA, DEFIS, European Union are already cooperating on several programs that put the two together. It was mentioned before by my director that we have a program in place where we already collaborate, which contribute to security. We have Copernicus, that you mentioned, and I remind that Copernicus is the largest program for Earth observation, and it provides global monitoring with area visit and plays a key role for emergency services and disaster monitoring. And this is for sure for the security of our citizens. We also have, as was mentioned before, the Galileo program, and the Galileo is the most accurate civilian navigation system, and it also includes the PRS service, which is actually has restricted access to governmental authorized users for sensitive application. Then we also have IRISquare, which is last but not least, which will provide secure connectivity to Europe. So all these are examples how the various agencies and the various intergovernmental entities can collaborate, and how peaceful purposes and security can coexist without any problem. The implementation of all these ambitious programs has been possible only thanks to the involvement of all industries from European member states, and thanks to collaboration between agencies, leveraging on each specific strengths and capability. And this is of the most important and is a fundamental element. Now we are preparing the next steps, for example, with the European Resilience System. And there are discussions ongoing, and there is an agreement already between ESA and the European Union, which put in place a task force for defining together the implementation of a resilient air observation system at the service of security. And this is very important because, as you said, the geopolitical context is changing, is evolving, and we need an even more united Europe, a stronger Europe, a more autonomous Europe to have a more secure Europe. Now, this more united Europe means stronger collaboration, which is something we have always to pursue. Stronger and more autonomous Europe means industrial capability, strong industry which can provide actually what we need to defend and for the security of Europe. And one of the main mandates of ESA is building the industrial capability. And the ESA procurement framework actually aims at increasing industrial capacity and competitiveness, and this brings excellence. You mentioned correctly our geo-return mechanism, and this is a policy that is in the ESA Convention that we apply when procuring and implementing our projects. This is a tool, this is a strong tool, and thanks to this geo-return policy, actually ESA allowed development of key capabilities and key technologies in several European member states, and this again brings competitiveness, which is fundamental. Now, I recall that these geo-return policies actually consist in the fact that ESA has to return in a fair way the investment that each member state put in ESA, which means we have to return at almost one-to-one level. This is a powerful motivation for member states to participate to ESA program because it allows to develop domestic capabilities and it guarantees financial return. Of course, this is a tool that we will continue to apply, but actually we are also working to complement it with other possibilities. We are defining, and we will test soon, alternative solutions like the fair return principle. This will be applied for the first time in the European Launcher Challenge that we are proposing to the next ministerial. In this case, what we want to explore is allow the possibility for industries to build consortia and to apply to our tenders independently from the geo-return situation. Then, once the selection process will be completed, we will come back to member states and we rediscuss with member states their contributions. This actually would provide quite a level of flexibility. Of course, this is a continuous interaction and conversation with our member states. In addition, we are also considering adding some flexibility. For example, we could consider to add flexibility in the level of return of the investments, or having some flexibility in families of programs, allowing shifting actually the budget where is needed, but also in line with industrial capability, still remembering that developing a new capability is at the core also of ESA. Also, we have to define policies, new one probably, for when ESA will have a role as anchor customer for commercial services. That is a new area that we actually want to enter into, and we are exploring. We are working internally. We are discussing with member states because actually I have to remind you that the European Space Agency is the space agency of its member states. Therefore, it is shaped and in agreement with them and will always pursue what is the final need of the member states. We have a dual system at national level, coming back to the security aspects. And we have mentioned before, for example, Cosmos CAMED. So Italy is very well equipped with a dual system. And this is a very powerful solution which can reconcile, actually, use of space, best usage of competencies, and usage of data for what is devoted to security. Now, considering developing dual system at European level actually is an incredible value, because it will increase exponentially the effectiveness of doing this at national level, because putting together a certain number of member states is not summing up their capabilities, it's actually bringing exponential results. And this is all that we are working now these days at the agency, and the DG before presented what is our aim. We will have the ministerial at the end of this year, and we are working hard to reconcile actually the traditional program, the operational program, the scientific program, but now entering in a new domain, which is the one of guaranteeing and strengthening the European security, because unfortunately the geopolitical context is changing and is calling more and more for this kind of intervention. But as usual, we have not to take it as a threat, and we have to take it as an opportunity, because it will be an opportunity to be stronger. And last point is stronger and more autonomous. Sometimes more autonomous might be seen as unwillingness to collaboration. Actually, here I really want to stress the fact stronger and more autonomous is for better collaboration. Because if we collaborate to cover our reciprocal weaknesses, then it's a weak collaboration. Yes, of course, this will bring results, but it's not based on the right topics. If we are strong and we are autonomous, then we collaborate to achieve greater results, and this will be stronger collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriella. I signed some key points, and the most common word you use a lot is dialogue. So it's very much important. I mean, you mentioned dialogue for making security and civilian purposes working together. You mentioned the dialogue between ESA and the member states for allowing also this complementary solution based on the geographical return as a fundamental pillar of ESA. And you mentioned also kind of dialogue, which is fundamental for making European as a whole more autonomous and stronger in space, especially we are talking about evolving space. And this is important because we need to understand how we want to evolve our national and European capabilities for make all of us stronger to be able to face the next challenges. I would still move further, and I would ask my friend Massimo Comparini. Massimo is the managing director of the new space business unit in Leonardo. So Massimo, Leonardo is the leading holding company for defense and space in Italy, one of the largest in Europe and in the world. And recently you presented its strategic, Leonardo presented the strategic plan where space has assumed a central importance. You are very knowledgeable. You have been also the CEO of Thales Alenia Space Italy. So the question to you is, what do you see as the most pressing challenge that Leonardo will face in the coming years, of course, dealing with space? And also, given the new operational scenarios and more uncertain economic landscape, how can we create synergies between the public and private sectors to ensure that level of the space security that is essential for sustaining the growth of the space economy, at the same time the full operational capabilities of the armed forces?
Thank you, Walter. I think that the challenges that we have are not different from the challenges on space in general. So what we discuss also today. And I have in mind two clusters of challenges. One is, of course, from a business model, from industrial perspective, and the other is from technology standpoint. And this is across if I could say, three main directions, and also three spaces or distance from the Earth. Why I said that? One, space, it's multi-domain, it's cross-domain. Josef, in his speech, touched, of course, the geospatial dimension, Earth observation, the connectivity, navigation and positioning. So we need to address, of course, the individual challenges of those domains, but at the end, if, and this is particularly relevant, I think, that in a conference like this, but also for the space economy at large, if we're talking about information, how we can derive information from our space infrastructures, we need to integrate those domains. It's essential that, of course, we communicate with the quickest or lowest latency where we are, what we can observe. And this is fundamental for civil application. It's fundamental to manage at the best an emergency, but it's also fundamental to generate and to secure and to make resilient information superiority. That, of course, I don't enter in the military doctrines. I cannot, on this stage, there are so many prominent general officers, but of course, information superiority through space asset is one of the dimensions that is extremely important. And then, multi-orbit. Multi-orbit around the Earth. Long debate in the past months about low latency global connectivity. I'm always used to remember that we communicate with geostationary satellites since decades. And for sure, to have a resilient connectivity, we need to have multi-orbit to be resilient, to secure that a critical infrastructure like space connectivity is kept every moment in every place. But also multi-orbit in outer space. And Senator Nelson, of course, touched the impact to connect Earth and Moon, and you touch as well. I mean, you talk about Earth and Moon system. A couple of years ago, I was in one of our plants in Turin, where, by the way, we are building more or less, Teodoro, 80% of the lunar gateway. Then let's see what happened. Where we start to design now the first ever lunar surface model, and I'm so pleased of the decision that ESA take a few months ago. We're going to build the first European lunar lander. So I was a couple of years there with the 4-star general, our DNA at that time, and I said, okay, why a DNA should be interested about moon exploration? And the answer is that also for the topic of this conference, we cannot stay just around the Earth. And a multiplanetary, starting from Earth and Moon that are close by, and a multiplanetary information system, communication system will be fundamental also to generate global information superiority about our planet, our home, the Earth. So if I could say, and then I will touch, of course, what we address in our industrial plan, those challenges are challenges where a group like us, a group like Leonardo, must to deliver end-to-end solutions, must be fast and quick to deliver those solutions, and must prepare all the technologies to deliver state-of-art end-to-end solutions. So if I could say from an industrial perspective, and having in mind that, let's say, through our companies, our JVs, our plants, we know and we feel the responsibility to represent a country that in space, it's a leading country. Of course, we have critical masses of investment that has been shown also by Josef. But technology-wise, in our capability to be ready to provide solutions, we're a leading company in a leading continent, which is Europe. So we want to deliver that fast and state-of-art. This is because space is, of course, changing, and it's changing fast, as we said. Now, we have, I will go more in detail, but let me start from something that I have in mind, because, of course, we talk about commercialization and the space economy. So we could have the temptation that we look everything in the commercial dimension. But I always remember myself, maybe the memory of some scientific mission that I was proud to be part, that without technology push from remarkable scientific mission, I have, for instance, in my mind, but also in my heart, Cassini-Huygens, without the push the boundaries of technologies of those scientific missions, even the commercial space cannot be possible today. A set of technologies that make able to produce thousands of satellites in a short time is coming also from the progress that in the last decades we had those scientific missions. Why I say that? Because, of course, an high-tech group like Leonardo, we need to understand how I can mature, invest, make ready technologies today to deliver end-to-end solutions. And I pick up a couple of technologies which is a priority in our plan. AI, okay, it's not a surprise. Laser optical communications, high-power computing. And why I pick up those technologies? At the end, I'm a micro engineer, so I'm still have in mind that we need chips and devices. Why? If we want to have interconnection between the systems, we need to move information across satellites, across single orbital planes, and maybe across different planes, and we must be fast. So we need to have a multi-gigabit laser communication to make that possible. If it is possible, I can move what is today on Earth, or also in a fifth or in a sixth generation aircraft, so the computing power in space. And I can generate a kind of layer of edge computing, cloud in space features. So I need high power computing, communication across the nodes, not only satellites, I call nodes. And this could be to communicate space to ground, ground to space, air to space, space to air, space to space. Now, a bit more on our industrial plan, which is connected also to your second part. I really believe that we need to have an evolution in the public-private paradigms. So one topic that we touch in our industrial plan is an investment, quite a large investment also compared to the numbers that we talked before, not less than €500 million, so 450 for a multi-sensing geospatial system, Earth observation constellation that taking the flagship project that we had the possibility to lead, IRIDE has been mentioned, Cosmos SkyMed second generation, hyperspectral sensors like Prisma, so 16, 18, 20 satellite, multi-sensing, radar technologies, electro-optical, hyperspectral, maybe a bit of infrared, to contribute to give a quite large database to provide geospatial application. Data for civil, as well as for dual use. High-power computing. We massively invest, the group massively invests in AI and high-power computing in the past few years. We have Da Vinci 1 that is now moving to Da Vinci 2, which is one of the most powerful supercomputers, the first one in the aerospace industry globally. So we really think that the huge amount of data that space generates and passing through space infrastructure may very close need to have a space data center that will be extremely relevant also for exploration phase, but also looking to the Earth. So that's the reason why we announced, let's say, the combination of high-power computing and space. Last but not least, a quite large area in the space surveillance, just to address the sea, which means congested. We know that the low Earth orbit is going to be congested. We know that it's a fact. It's going to be contested, so we need to know what is around the house, 500 kilometers around house in the low Earth orbit. We need to project what the danger of a possible, let's say, not voluntary collision. We need to understand how we can operate in orbit. And just to remember another piece, remarkable piece of the Italian recovery plan that the Italian Space Agency directly managed. Smart Space Factory has been recalled, IRIDE has been recalled. I want to recall also another project, which is IOS, in orbit service, because it is, to my knowledge, Teodoro, the first project for sure in Europe for a full vehicle giving and addressing, let's say, all the services in orbit operation, which means maintenance, refueling, active debris removal in orbit manufacturing. And again, a good example, let's say, of dual-use technology. So just to conclude, I think that the challenge that we have as Leonardo with all the panorama of our companies, our GV, Telespazio, Thales Alenia Space, let's say, it's to respond to those challenges that also today were said, securing that we can bring state-of-art technologies, and with a couple of dimensions that has been already touched. One, to be a catalyst of international cooperation and partnership, to be a catalyst of an impressive, rich supply chain of small, medium enterprises and startups that are active in Italy, and also to bring what I think this best practice also at European level. Thank you.
Thank you, Massimo. Just a couple of points that I would highlight. The critical approach that you need in terms of a cross-domain mentality, if I may, and this multi-orbit approach, even looking at the future critical infrastructure to spread them out in a different multi-orbits. I want to try to speed it up a little bit just to see if we can catch a few questions from the audience at the very end. Still on the industrial side, I would address Ms. Stephanie Bednarek, Vice President of Commercial Sales in SpaceX. Stephanie, in recent years, SpaceX has actually revolutionized the launcher industry. SpaceX is doing a lot of activities, including delivering astronauts back and forth from the International Space Station, and I had the privilege to fly on the Dragon just last year. You are doing a lot of things, building up new constellation, mega constellation as a Starlink. Starship development is amazing to see this, effort in developing new launcher technologies, lunar lander, and now you are talking about Mars mission. The questions to you are, first of all, which kind of technological trajectory you see as a SpaceX to remain competitive on the market? And also, since you are looking at these, as Massimo was mentioning, multi-orbit activities from LEO orbit to the moon and then to Mars, how do you envision an integrated logistics architecture between at least the upcoming new infrastructures in LEO and the Moon to make the new space economy more flourishing and sustainable?
Well, thank you so much. First off, thank you for the invitation, and I appreciate these questions. I know you had a productive trip to the International Space Station, but did you enjoy the ride?
Yep.
Okay, good. And how many of you would like to go to orbit one day? See, excellent. Oh, that's not as many hands as I expected. I'm sure you more did when you were children. I still want to go, of course, should I be given the opportunity. The simple answer to your question, in my perspective, is rapid reusability in launch. SpaceX has had 468 successful Falcon launches to date. Just this year, we've launched 53 launches. I took my family to a vacation in Florida, and my 4-year-old daughter got to see 3 launches in a week, and she was disappointed that there wasn't one every day. So I'm very optimistic about a future where 4-year-olds think launches happen every day, if not more, and what possibilities that opens up. First off, I also want to applaud Italy's leadership in space. SpaceX has had the privilege of working with a number of Italian agencies and companies, many of whom are here today. So we're pleased to launch the Cosmos SkyMed mission. That was a very successful mission. Thank you for your trust and support in that program. Of course, launching satellites for Thales Alenia Space in Italy, OHB Italia, D-Orbit, TIVAC, Citael, Argotech. We're very proud of those missions we were able to successfully launch. SpaceX, of course, also partners with customers and satellite manufacturers all over the world. By last count, we've launched for 58 different satellites from 58 different countries, and astronauts as well, and pleased to be able to support those that many satellites. With Falcon, we have a really great and strong fleet. We can launch ambitious missions to LEO, to the Moon, interplanetary. When I started at SpaceX 16 years ago, the ambitious statements that SpaceX was making about Falcon reusability and aspirations of a high cadence, at the time, I remember hearing statements of trying to achieve 40 missions a year. And now we're at the point where last year SpaceX launched 138 Falcons in a year. What I see ahead is our ambitious look at what we'll be able to accomplish with Starship. And I think it's really difficult to overstate what a game changer Starship will be. It's going to unlock incredible possibilities. It is rapidly reusable with incredible performance and volume. And I really challenge our customers and satellite manufacturers and companies that we work with to start thinking differently about the equation of satellite design and payload design. Perhaps we no longer need to optimize for mass, for volume, but with a high cadence allowed by rapid reusability, we'll be able to drastically lower the cost on a dollar per kilogram basis. We will launch both Falcon and Starship together for a period of time, but I really do encourage everyone to start thinking differently about how payloads are going to look and what architectures can look like when you have that type of manifest availability. I'm incredibly excited about the work in human spaceflight that we're continuing to support the International Space Station. We've also had Dragon free flyer missions. Human spaceflight is at the core of our mission to make life multiplanetary. We've launched 17 crew missions so far. I'm excited to see when commercial destinations come online. I look forward to seeing what that will unlock for the space economy, for science, for research, and again, that contributes to our goal of making life multiplanetary. We have strong ambitions to go to Mars as well, and we'll be attempting to go to Mars at every window that we can. And really, I think we're at the verge of opening up even more possibility of access to space. And I encourage everybody to think about what that kind of manifest availability and payload capacity will unlock. It's also just a really amazing time in the industry to see new launchers come online. Congratulations on the success of Ariane 6 and Vega C and other launchers that are debuting with increased performance and capability. More is better. And this is really a turning point. So again, to answer your question directly, I think rapid reusability is absolutely the key to unlocking additional potential to see these architectures come to fruition, both on communications, but also in exploration. And it's going to be an exciting future. So thank you. I see I'm efficient as SpaceX.
We recovered the minutes
so,
that we were lacking, so thank you so much. Perfect. Really appreciate it. But actually, let me say, everyone has been to the Kennedy Space Center to see a launch, looking at the first stage of the Falcon 9 coming back through the subsonic boom. When you're coming back, it's impressive.
You really have to come and see a Starship stage booster return to see that being caught by the chopsticks is really, really an incredible sight.
Right. But then again, as you recap, rapid and reusable launches for making, more and more launchers over the year, and of course keeping the cost even more reduced. So that's perfect. And let's move and let's go back to our more military side. So Major General Philippe Adam, French Space Commander. Last but not least, sir, so let's back to our domain. It is now clear that space as a domain will be likely a confrontational environment. If not kinetic, for sure, cybernetic probably already is. So, and we, as yesterday General Saltzman was mentioning, we look at some like dogfight maneuvers. So space is becoming more and more active. In the 21st century, the concept of space superiority looks like what the air superiority was in the 20th century. I would like to address the most uncomfortable question, but it's central to us all. It is, are we ready, in your view, to face a war in space? And also expanding a little bit of context, how do you think we should modernize our space forces, both domestically and within the NATO alliance, to be adequately responsive and interoperable, aiming at future multi-domain operation? And how could industry help us and our armed forces to achieve this goal?
Well, thank you very much. I would take this opportunity to thank Italy and especially General Goretti for inviting me this morning to offer these quick remarks. And after, I feel a challenge of being the only one in uniform on this panel. But also to be the last speaker on the last panel. So I would like to, I will try to keep that entertaining, at least not to repeat anything that's already been told. It will be difficult because there's been a lot of very good material delivered already during those 2 days. First, I would like to come back on the quote, on the Julia Duet quote that you used, but also Sir Richard used earlier this morning, on we need to anticipate the changes in the character of war. I think that's really essential, but we also have to define what are those changes we have to anticipate, and what is a change in the character of war, of course. And we are also to consider, by the way, what we are doing to anticipate is changing the character of war or not, and if what we do has also an effect. So the idea is try not to be always reactive, but also many people said that the situation has changed and we have to react to it. So there's the game is a bit more complex than just trying to read the future and do your best, because you have to manage both the long term and the very short term. With that, what has changed from the space perspective on the character of war? I would offer, and it comes from everything that was said before I took the floor, of course, but I think that in a nutshell, for us military, for us in the space commands, and it draws from the observation that was made earlier this morning that If you don't have an aircraft, you don't need an air force. If you don't have a satellite, you don't need a space force or a space command, of course. But it's not only that. It's not only having satellites, is what you need to do with it, and what's next in terms of challenges for what you're building and what you're investing for. So, in a nutshell, again, what has changed for us, what we need to consider for the future, but also for the short term, is that we really need to prepare for a war for space. What fighting for space? It's because space is becoming the ultimate high ground, of course, and that's where you will take your operational advantage in the future. Certainly, you will draw lots of your operational superiority from what you have in space and what we can get from space, of course. And if you have to fight for space, you have also to be ready to fight in space, which makes things very different for the future, of course. Basically, we talked a lot about multi-domain operations and the sort, and interoperability, and that will come back, of course, in my remarks. But it's basically a cultural change. It's not only about space, of course, it's also about cyber and all the rest, and the way you connect and the way you imagine the wars of the future, of course. If it's a cultural change, of course, there are many, many things that you need to adapt or you need to rethink. And the first, of course, it has been discussed heavily already on space and air, is adapt your procurement in terms of quality of what you deliver, better quality, even lower quality as well, but also in terms of quantity. And the rest is not only that. If you want to fight, your equipment is not the only thing to consider. We got a very nice panel just before this one about the challenges in education and people, of course. But we also have to refine our concept, to define new concepts as well. Training and education, of course, is essential also in a domain where, of course, I accept the US from this remark, but we all need to build our own expertise, of course, so that we need to consider that. I'm very, very proud that France is currently the only country in Europe offering space training open to partners. So that's every year in Toulouse, and that's very important. And partnership also is something to consider. It's everywhere in all the space different strategies that I've read, but also being able to operate with our partners is essential, of course, for the future success. Interoperability, of course, has to be considered with this enlarged partnership that we have to build. Interoperability is not only interconnectivity, of course. Interconnectivity helps. Everybody has in mind what you can do if everybody has the same air-to-air refueling system, for example. But it's not only that, it's really the way you can operate with others with minimum effort. So it's, again, it requires a lot of preparation. It's in the mind, it's in the training, it's in the way you organize, it's in the way you build your C2 structure, command and control structure. And so in the way the tools that you procure to support the work of your planners and operators, of course, are efficient. So the command and control tools are essential for that as well. So coming back to your question, are we ready? And what do we need to do next? What are our priorities? That's the difficult part of the question, of course. And the situation has changed. Everybody says we are in a contested environment in space. Yes, and if I look at the way we describe the situation in France, rather than speaking about peacetime, crisis, and war, with our three different states, it's more a continuum from competition through contestation to a full open war. But it's really a continuum, and if we are already in a contested situation, the situation is already bad, and it is quite bad. So are we ready right now to fight? I would offer that not really, if we consider that we are late on what the opponents, our competitors, can oppose to us, of course, and we really took a late start for many reasons that have been discussed already. But we have to catch up. and we have to consider where we have to invest and what will be the more profitable in terms of investment to catch up on this race. Now, is this race lost? And of course, you have to understand that as a military, I always have to show the real pessimistic scenario. Of course, we have to consider the worst scenario. That's our job. So if I sound a bit sad or a bit dark, please forgive me. But this is the bright side coming now. Is this race lost? No, because we can see that we are reacting fast in terms of building new policies, of course, but also taking action. Again, it's not over yet, and we have still a lot to do to make things even quicker than they are now. There are lots of effort enhancing the partnerships, and this audience, of course, is a good show. The fact that we have this type of conference and that people are showing up to express their views and trying to share their experience on that, I think is really essential also for the future. And it will help that comprehension and that partnership between the military also will help, I'm pretty sure, developing more collaboration on the political but also on the industrial side later on. We have also to realize that probably we have more in our stockpiles or in our inventories than what we think, and at least what we have now can produce many effects that we need to develop, certainly, but also probably to practice and to show and probably to enhance using partnership, but also bringing online only what is really necessary to enhance what we already have. So that, on the priority, if we want really to bring everything together and make sure that we are ready to fight that war in the future, I think the main thing has already been discussed at large is we need to act quickly. And that works in two different directions. When you think about military capabilities, of course, the first one is make sure that the space support to general military operations is improved. So make it quicker, of course, make it sure that you can deliver those data and effects to the fighting forces in a better way. You have to multiply, certainly, the effects you can deliver. You have to diversify those effects. You have to make sure that what you're doing or your organization, your architecture is resilient, of course, and everything needs to be interoperable. So interoperability, again, can be worked on. It's not only a matter of connectivity, but connectivity will probably help us improving all those services we are getting from space. And there we have to consider, and I think we all consider it the same way. You've got your own sovereign proprietary military capability, but it's not sufficient, and you have also to work on a more augmented capability that you have probably less control than on military capability, but still some type of control, and everything additional, all the services you can get from anywhere that can be useful in times of war, of course. It has to be considered in your organization and the way you train. And the second point, of course, where we have certainly to speed up a little bit is on space superiority, and that's a discussion already have. What is space superiority and what do we need to do that? There is space access, certainly, but also making sure that what you do in space, well, you can do what you expect to do in space and do it properly, and consider what advantage you have on your possible adversary and what possible advantage your adversary has on you using space, of course. NATO, of course, speaking about interoperability, of course, NATO is everywhere in the conversation, of course, and that's really one advantage that we have to work with NATO, is working on interoperability standards that will bring advantage to the alliance, but also individually to all the nations if we build interoperable equipments and capability, of course. And we also, there is also an advantage is that NATO is necessary for us all if we consider that it's an essential part of the collective defense game in the future, and a threat that is coming back, of course, that we probably forgot a little bit during the past years. And the last part of the question was, what can industry bring? Of course, we discussed about capabilities and equipment, of course, and how can industry bring them quicker on the inventory. But I think that we have also to consider what the commercial sector can bring in terms of just services, in fact, and take what we need for military operation directly from the commercial sector is something interesting, and realizing that our interest, military interests or national defense interests are also very close to the interests of the commercial sector is interesting. If we can operate freely in space, of course, the commercial sector can also, and it's pretty important for the commercial sector, I suppose, that space stays secure and stays sustainable for the future. So we are all in that game together, and bringing the commercial sector with us, I think it's a big part of that, and we tried to do that, all of us. And in the exercise I already mentioned, of course, we have that part as well, and we have this commercial integration cell in our exercise, and we have had it since the beginning. So that's bringing everything together, realizing that we've got the same interest. That's coming back to a strong Europe and a strong community of interest, in fact, will help us in the future. And certainly it's coming back to a full cultural change that is underway, but there's still a lot to do. But I'm pretty optimistic that we can achieve it fast if we can make the changes that we all discussed earlier on.
Thank you very much, sir. I would recap what you said with a clear statement: fight for space implies fight in space. This is the capability that we have to look for. I think that from your speech and from the previous panel, we can say that there's some from the doctrine, from the air doctrine and knowledge, we are bringing some of these principles even in space. You mentioned that we need to anticipate the changes. To do that, we need to understand and manage the long-term and the short-term changes. This is something that requires an assessment loop, something that the General Manieri was mentioning this morning, and that you are practicing, trying to foster this partnership in Toulouse. Partnership means exercise, and this brings to interoperability. So again, all the air experience that we gather in this over these years is very important for build up our space capabilities in this contested space. We have just 4 minutes left, so I will catch one very easy question, asking all of you in 30 seconds, 40 seconds, just to try to make an exercise of imagination. So not very complicated, but the question that I want to pick is what you see, try to imagine 20, 30 years time frame, which might be a couple of technologies that we don't have at the moment, but that you can envision could come up with this fast space changing and evolution of space. So it's a mix in between some imagination and some of the knowledge that you already have. So don't be shy, don't stay too much close to what is now, but what might be in the future. We have just 3 minutes, so please let's start with the Italian Space Agency President, Professor Valente. Teodoro, please.
Very shortly, let's see what will happen with the artificial intelligence.
Sir, Senator.
20 years from now, if you all and we have done our job, that we have maintained the peace, because the next potential war is in space, big war. And then looking, if you've maintained the peace, 20 years from now, we will be on Mars. The question is how soon we will get there. Right now, it's very difficult to go to Mars with humans because chemical propulsion takes us months and months to get there. We need nuclear fusion. We need nuclear electric, nuclear thermal, and we can get there a lot quicker on the first trip, so we don't have to stay on the surface such a long time. It's going to be an exciting time 20 years from now.
Thank you. Gabriella, what's your standpoint?
Yes, I would stress what was said before by Massimo. There will be new technology, artificial intelligence and computing, and those will enable the maximum exploitation of the data that we are already acquiring, for example, from Earth observation. So we have a lot of data. There is a huge potentiality in it. It's not exploited yet in full, and that will change our daily life, actually.
Massimo.
Breakthrough in propulsion technology to be faster, and then quantum chips, quantum communication, and a network of laser communication, which is not only around the Earth, but it's in a multiplanetary network.
Stephanie?
I hope you'll invite me back in 20 years, see if we're right. Multiple launches a day, regular launches happening all of the time. And in 20 years, I think a sustained human presence on Mars of an international group, and I'm really excited for that future.
General.
Yeah, for me, it draws, and thank you, Senator Nelson, for reminding us that the military is not here to wage war, but to protect peace. I think that's very important. And if we have done our job correctly, peace is still there in 20 years from now, of course. And as you said, the technology has developed significantly, and the activity in space has increased in the same way. So you see more and more maneuvers, and not only orbital things, rotating around the Earth, but much more complex maneuvers, more things coming from Earth up to space, to orbit and further down, and coming back down on Earth, and that's going with your business, of course. And with that, for us, it's a whole new challenge to make sure that we can maintain peace in this whole new environment, and more dynamic, where there are the possibilities of more threats, unfortunately.
Thank you very much. We just hit the 0 countdown, so I call for a big applause to our distinguished panelists. Thank you so much. Thank you. No, perfect. Thank you so much. I guess we can.
Thank you to our final group of experts and their moderator for closing their conference in the best possible way. As we come to the end of this two-day conference filled with thought-provoking talks and sharing of knowledge, we'd like to take a moment to thank all of our keynote speakers, esteemed panelists and moderators for making this event a great success. Now, before inviting you to take the time to explore the aerospace exhibition, which is still currently open and available for public viewing, we still have two final closing remarks from our military and political authorities. So first, I'd like to hand over the floor again to Aeronautica Militare Chief of Staff, Lieutenant General Luca Goretti.
Thank you, Greta, for the outstanding job done. Really, really appreciate it. Please give her a round of applause. Let me thank all my staff and personnel that put in place this marvelous two-days event. It's a unique opportunity also to present our effort, how we manage this kind of event in order to gather people all together. And we are looking forward for the next 2 years event, number 3, in 2027, and probably will be more important, more relevant. And I want to have all of you back again here in Rome. If I may just add one comment on the last questions that Walter raised to the panelists. I suggest, you need to have a vision. I suggest for the next run, if you want to go to the moon, bring a pole and a ribbon, white and yellow ribbon, and a lawyer. Why? The first come, first serve. The first guy that will be on the moon with the pole and the ribbon will mark his country. It's very simple. The British and the French did the same in the United States. They move a little bit to the west, and they conquer all the United States of America, and they make America great again. Think about it. If you are going to the moon, and you don't have a lawyer that says this is a free space, the first one will conquer the moon and will say, it's mine. So everybody else, in order to go to the moon, has to pay something, or at least has to fight. If they reach the visible area of the moon, and you don't want to talk to him, you have to go on the other side of the moon, the invisible one, and it will be difficult to go there. And then you start fighting in order to go to the visible side of the moon, in order to have a close connection, communication with your friends back on the Earth. And then you start fighting. And then, maybe I will be dead by that time, hopefully, you will have to review the movie Star Wars. Then the war will start on space. So we have a goal to meet. Prevent this to happen. Keep the space as a deterrent place to defend our land, to defend our Earth. Because if we won't do this, it will be very, very difficult for us to sustain this kind of goal. Because economy, private attitude of being king or whatever, will face against the freedom of our people. And we cannot admit that. I think that inside this room, all the military people, all of us, we don't want to do war. We'll be the first one to be killed, of course. And I don't think the medicine will be fast enough to regenerate us. So why put this in the market? No, don't do it. But we learned these 2 days that the strategy and the situation, the geopolitical situation right now, give us something to think. We need to be united. We need to be interoperable, and we need to share information. And we need to have courage to share information, because there are countries that knows everything, and there are countries that know nothing. But all the countries, they are here, are friends. So among friends, we need to share, and we need to expedite the sharing. Otherwise, we lose the opportunity, because somebody else is doing the same thing. Then we realize that the industries is with us. We need to rely on them. We need to rely on their products, and we need to push them to provide us what is necessary to be relevant. But Rich today was telling us that never assume that a smart guy cannot be a great leader. Churchill stated, for your admiral and marshal. And it turned out completely wrong. So we might make mistakes. So we cannot make mistakes. We have to prepare the leaders, form the leaders for the next generations. And we have to do it. We have to do it. We have to tell them how can become leaders. Let them play. Let them make mistakes. But let us give them advices because of our experiences. And of course, at the end, the space is the relevant place. We have to face it. And I have to thank all the space agencies and the space experts. I'm not an expert. They bring us a vision of what will be our needs for the future, to be in peace. So my final question is, in the next 2 years, think about it, how to protect us. Think about, talking to the chiefs, how can you do what you have to do to pass to your people to protect them to be in war. We don't have to go to war. We need to keep everything in a very peaceful manner, no matter what. So with this in mind, I'm so happy that this 2 days was a proper opportunity to meet each other again. This is the major task I gave to my staffers. Create the opportunity to meet, create the opportunity to talk, create the opportunity to share, to know each other better, and to show to the young generation that are sitting up there that we are capable of doing. We can provide a very good example that if we want to be friends, if we want to share, we can do it. So, especially for the people that are up there, don't forget this. We are able to do it. One day, you will be sitting in front, and you have to think in the same way if you want to be in a peaceful land. It's up to you. Be honest, be courageous, and talk and find friends. That's the only way to keep you alive. Thank you, everybody. I will thank all my staffers for the support and all the sponsors and the people up there to set up all the lights and everything. And see you in the next 2 years. And probably I won't be here for sure, but I will offer to my successor a wish and good luck for the future because he deserves it. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Lieutenant General Goretti, for your profound vision. Now we are glad and grateful to be joined by Undersecretary of Defense Matteo Perego di Cremnago, which I'd like to welcome on the stage for his closing remarks as well. To all of you from the audience, please feel free to use your headset for simultaneous translation. Undersecretary, please, the stage is yours.
Closing remarks at lunch time. I promise I'll do it as fast as I can. Thank you, General Goretti. Thank you to the Italian Air Force for hosting this important event. And thank you for the speaker, moderators, and guests. Sorry if I move to Italian now. I hope you have the translation. Grazie. Voglio partire anch'io dall'ultima domanda. Come immaginiamo il mondo fra 20 anni? Per rispondere voglio guardare a com'era il mondo 20 anni fa e vedere quali straordinari progressi sono stati fatti in questi 2 decenni. E penso che i prossimi 20 anni saranno qualcosa forse di inimmaginabile, ma certamente, su questo sono convinto, come è stato detto da alcuni degli speaker che mi hanno preceduto, se non lavoriamo per mantenere la pace, se non lavoriamo per preservare la sicurezza dei nostri cittadini, non ci sarà progresso, ma ci sarà quella che Einstein immaginava una società fatta di pietre e bastoni dopo la Terza Guerra Mondiale. Quindi il compito nostro, della politica, delle forze armate, è di proteggere le nostre istituzioni e questa responsabilità credo che oggi la sentiamo ancora più forte su di noi, su tutti quelli che sono presenti in questa sala, ed è compito continuare a lavorare per costruire ponti. Generale Goretti ha parlato di nuovi amici, certamente di consolidare con gli amici, con i partner, la cooperazione anche per tutelare la sicurezza e la pace. Ma se c'è una cosa che ci hanno insegnato, non soltanto gli interventi che ho ascoltato adesso, ma le grandi rivoluzioni di questi tempi, che bisogna essere ambiziosi, affamati, creativi, e lo dico soprattutto a chi è seduto in fondo, ai giovani, di non aver paura ad essere visionari, di non aver paura a sperimentare idee nuove, a pensare out of the box, perché questo credo che sia il senso di chi in questi anni ha trasformato soprattutto lo spazio tra le altre industrie e tra gli altri domini operativi. Certamente l'aeronautica italiana, così credo come ogni aeronautica nel mondo, è la porta d'ingresso dell'innovazione tecnologica e dove le innovazioni sono costanti, sono necessarie per continuare a operare con efficacia. E credo, posso dirlo con orgoglio, che l'aeronautica italiana in questi anni ha fatto un enorme progresso in avanti, un'aeronautica che può operare nel dominio aereo con la quarta generazione, la quinta generazione e sta lavorando alla sesta generazione. Così come nello spazio, qui lasciatemi dire da italiano orgoglioso, penso al 1964 in cui abbiamo lanciato il primo satellite San Marco da Malindi. Noi c'eravamo all'inizio della corsa dello spazio e vogliamo essere protagonisti anche nel presente ma soprattutto nel futuro. E un'altra lezione appresa sono le barriere istituzionali, le barriere all'ingresso dello spazio che sono state per certi versi superate dalla capacità dello spazio di essere anche attrattivo per la dimensione commerciale. Questo non deve spaventare, credo, le istituzioni, ma deve essere la consapevolezza che pubblico e privato insieme, che settore civile e militare insieme, quando lavorano uno a fianco all'altro, possono portare a risultati straordinari. E credo che dallo spazio certamente verranno le preoccupazioni, le necessità di intervenire nelle operation, nello spazio in favore della sicurezza. Certo, questo è un aspetto fondamentale nel quale il nostro Paese, insieme a tutti i Paesi partner, alleati, amici, dovrà sviluppare delle capacità in grado di difendere lo spazio. Ma nello spazio ci sono anche quelle innovazioni tecnologiche che cambieranno la vita dei nostri cittadini nei prossimi 20 anni. Io sicuramente non sarò qua come sottosegretario, non so neanche se sarò qua come ospite, ma certamente i giovani che sono seduti in fondo saranno qua, saranno la nuova leadership. E questa leadership deve saper coniugare la capacità di tutelare allora, quando fra 20 anni l'intelligenza artificiale avrà probabilmente sostituito la nostra intelligenza, in cui il quantum computing avrà fatto progressi straordinari, loro però dovranno essere capaci di difendere l'umanità e di lasciare a noi allora vecchietti, tra 20 anni, un ruolo centrale nell'economia del nostro Paese, nella nostra sicurezza, nella nostra difesa. Queste sono le sfide, saper coniugare l'innovazione tecnologica ma la tutela dell'individuo, saper coniugare i requisiti di sicurezza e allo stesso tempo di sviluppo. Ci sono 3 parole che a me piacciono quando penso all'innovazione tecnologica e che credo che siano le più forti e che caratterizzino di più la nostra epoca. Faster, cheaper, better. E questi sono i 3 mantra che credo noi dovremmo perseguire nella corsa all'evoluzione dello spazio, per portarci su Marte e oltre, ma soprattutto per dare alla nostra società i benefici della tecnologia e farlo attraverso la difesa, attraverso le forze armate, attraverso l'aeronautica che, come dicevo, è uno strumento, un catalizzatore di tecnologia, ci dà anche la garanzia che mentre si fa sviluppo tecnologico si fa anche sicurezza. E vorrei che uscendo da questa sala ciascuno di noi raccontasse non solo quello che si è sentito in questi 2 giorni, ma alla nostra opinione pubblica lo straordinario bisogno di essere consapevoli dell'epoca in cui viviamo. È stato detto dal Ministro Crosetto ieri, lo ripetiamo in tanti da diverso tempo. È un'epoca complessa in cui i fondamentali che ci hanno portato fino a qua sono stati messi in discussione, ma noi dobbiamo continuare a difendere un sistema di valori, un sistema di valori, di ideali, ma soprattutto il nostro sistema, il nostro modo di vivere, che è fatto di cittadini liberi che vogliono continuare a poter avere i propri diritti, ma vogliono anche essere beneficiati dalle evoluzioni tecnologiche, nello spazio, nell'aerospazio, nella dimensione quotidiana dei nostri cittadini. Noi oggi siamo chiamati a questo grande senso di responsabilità per difendere il presente, per costruire il futuro. Se siamo tutti insieme uniti, saremo protagonisti di una grande epoca che con grande entusiasmo caratterizzerà il mondo nei prossimi anni, altrimenti non avremo più nulla di questo sviluppo e sarà un vero peccato per l'umanità non avere la capacità di poter guardare al futuro con serenità e con sicurezza, ma sono sicuro che grazie a voi potremo farlo. Grazie a tutti.
Thank you very much, Undersecretary, for your remarks, and thank you everyone for attending the Italian AeroSpace Power Conference. Please remember to leave your headsets on site. They're not a giveaway gadgets. We are sincerely, genuinely grateful to all of you for your active engagement. Personally, it's been deeply inspiring and instructive, and as Lieutenant General Goretti said, we look forward to seeing you again in 2 years at the next AeroSpace Power Conference in May 2027. Thank you.